Welcome back to Panda Review. In 1995, the disappearance of a hiker in the remote mountains of Oregon sparked speculation about a virus linked to the region's wildlife. The mysterious disease transformed those infected into wolves, and gradually, they lost their human nature. The story begins with Blake and his father, Grady, a very strict man, who is hunting together in a forest. Blake sees a strange creature through the scope, but it quickly disappears from his sight. Blake tries to tell his father about it, and it seems his father also realizes something is wrong. Grady takes Blake to a nearby hunting tower. He signals Blake to stay silent, while he aims his gun at the noise coming from around the hunting tower. However, it seems that the creature has left. Grady stands up to observe and sees the body of a deer torn apart nearby. A shadow flashes past Grady's scope. He reassures Blake that it is just a grizzly bear, a species that is very common in this valley. That night, when they return home, Blake eavesdrops on his father's conversation with a stranger. Grady is talking about a bizarre creature. It stood on two legs and tried to attack them. 30 years after that hunting trip, Blake now has a small family in New York City. He is currently facing some family and career issues. Blake is an unemployed writer. His wife, Charlotte, is someone who only thinks about work. And Ginger, their little daughter, is in her rebellious teenage years. Blake is trying to control his emotions so as not to affect his marriage and family. That night, he receives a death notice along with a key. His father, Grady, who had recently gone missing, has been confirmed dead. Feeling truly stuck, Blake decides to take his family there for a vacation. In an effort to mend his relationship with Charlotte, the whole family travels to the valley by truck. Blake quickly realizes he is lost. Perhaps it has been too long since he last returned to this place. Luckily, Blake meets a local resident. It's Derek, a childhood friend of his. Derek says that it has been a long time since Blake last returned. Then Derek gets in the truck to guide Blake towards Grady's farm. They don't travel for long before it starts to get dark, when Derek is marveling at Blake's happy life in New York with his small family. A figure appears right in front of the truck. Startling Blake, he swerves, causing the truck to change direction and plunge into the ravine. The truck is caught and stuck in the trees. Derek tries to open the door to escape but falls to the ground. Charlotte and Ginger are in total panic. Both climb onto the roof of the truck while Blake is still inside. Something breaks the glass and claws at Blake's hand. Then it drags Derek out of Blake's sight. Blake helps his wife and child out of the truck. They start moving towards the farm. The terrifying creature chases closely behind. But fortunately, they make it into the house and lock the door tightly. The strange creature moves around the house. Blake rushes to check the windows and doors to make sure they are locked. He goes down to the basement and finds the generator switch. Surprisingly, after so many years, it still works. The electric light still cannot make Charlotte and Ginger feel any less scared. Blake tries to reassure his daughter and puts her to sleep. Charlotte asks Blake what was chasing them. Blake does not know for sure. He only knows its breath is like that of a wild animal. And it stands on two legs like a human. Blake blocks the front door with a bookshelf. Then he goes down to the basement, trying to contact help using an old radio. Blake suddenly smells something strange. He checks and finds a stash of dried meat nearby. He picks it up to eat and feels pain. One of Blake's teeth falls out. Charlotte notices the wound on Blake's hand. She disinfects and bandages it. Blake then takes a hammer and nails to reinforce the wooden planks on the door. But he quickly realizes something is wrong with his body. His hearing becomes sharp. Something is moving inside the house. Following the sound upstairs, Blake opens the closet and sees a spider moving inside. Blake goes downstairs and signals Charlotte to stay silent. He hears the strange creature moving around the house. As he presses his ear against the door to listen, the monster breaks the door and grabs Blake's leg. Charlotte attacks it repeatedly with a hammer, causing it to retreat. Blake panics and faints. Around 2 a.m., Blake wakes up. He feels everything around him change. Blake hears Charlotte's voice from the basement. He goes down and sees Charlotte trying to call for help using the radio. In the dark basement, Blake sees everything more clearly than ever. His presence startles Charlotte and scares her. She sees Blake's face change. And Blake cannot speak. Lying in bed, Blake's hair is gradually falling out. He writes on paper that he is dying. Charlotte tries to reassure Blake that he is just very sick, and he will get better when they get out of here in the morning. But the transformation makes Blake unable to understand what Charlotte is saying. He just lies there in silence. Charlotte suddenly sees Blake's arm bleeding. She removes the bandage to check and sees the infection spreading. Even more terrifying, Blake lunges at the wall and tears at his wound. Charlotte feels afraid of her husband. Blake then becomes more conscious and wants to say something to Charlotte. Charlotte goes to the window and sees the old pickup truck in the yard. She goes to the basement to get the keychain and a knife. She silently leads Charlotte and Ginger near the truck. After many efforts, the truck finally starts, but the monster appears right at the car window. It smashes the glass and attacks Charlotte. She fights back with the knife. The whole family leaves the truck and climbs onto a nearby dome. The monster below tries to jump up to grab them. This scares Ginger, who almost falls. Blake signals the mother and daughter to go towards the house, while he distracts the monster. Charlotte and Ginger barely get inside when they hear a sound at the door. Blake is standing outside, seemingly badly injured. He enters the house and collapses on the floor. His face is even more deformed. His nails have changed shape. Blake vomits blood along with one of the monster's fingers. Losing control, Blake lunges at Charlotte, scaring her. Blake intends to leave, realizing he will hurt his wife and daughter. But the monster is already waiting and attacks Blake. It grabs him and throws him to the floor. Charlotte grabs a knife and attacks it, making the monster change its target. Blake intercepts it and wrestles with the monster. He is overpowered, but Charlotte strikes it with a metal rod. Taking the opportunity, Blake attacks and finishes off the monster by biting its throat. But when Blake sees the tattoo on its arm, he realizes it is his father, Grady. Recognizing the danger of the disease, Blake rushes out of the house as his body gradually transforms. A monster like his father. Blake appears in the house, frightening Charlotte and Ginger. She slashes Blake's arm and runs with her daughter towards the barn. Blake chases them and breaks the door to enter. In the dark, Blake sees Charlotte and Ginger more clearly than ever. But Blake steps on a hunting trap and gets stuck. Charlotte and Ginger panic and run from the barn. Driven by instinct, Blake bites off his own leg to escape the trap. Then Blake chases Charlotte and Ginger like a wild predator. Charlotte runs to the crashed truck. She finds Derek's gun and a nearby watchtower. They climb up and try to stay silent. Meanwhile, Blake is crawling toward it. Charlotte, scared, points the gun forward. Blake appears, but it seems he does not want to harm Charlotte and Ginger. His eyes seem to say something to his daughter. A gunshot rings out. Charlotte ends Blake's life in agony. Perhaps Blake wanted her to do it because he did not want to become a monster like his father. Charlotte and Ginger hug each other and cry. The mother and daughter leave the valley and start a new life, carrying Blake's memory with them.